You know that feeling when you open a bag of chips, fully intending to just have a quick handful, only to look down a few minutes later and realize the entire bag is completely gone? Well, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the highly engineered science, the heavily guarded corporate secrets, and the intense public health battles surrounding ultra-processed foods. We're going to break down exactly how what we eat has been fundamentally altered at a molecular level. And spoiler alert, feeling like you literally can't stop eating isn't actually a failure of your willpower. It's a triumph of corporate engineering. Let's jump right in. We have to start with the profound human toll here, anchoring our investigation in the raw, pretty devastating reality of patients like Carol and Rebecca. They describe severe binge eating and just a total loss of control. Carol recounted how she would sit in front of the TV and just eat more and more and more, completely unable to stop herself. This isn't just about feeling a little too stuffed after a big dinner. It's a profound psychological torment. It's that feeling of being trapped in an inescapable cycle. And, the deep, isolating shame that these patients feel when they lose control, that is exactly what the food industry relies on to avoid public scrutiny and regulation. Okay, so let's really dive into this. Investigative journalist Michael Moss, who actually won a Pulitzer Prize and spent years looking into the manufacturing of processed foods, he initially thought all these claims were completely overblown. He resisted calling these products addictive because, frankly, it sounds totally absurd to compare an Oreo cookie to heroin, right? But once he looked past the colorful, happy packaging and actually dug into the hard science and internal industry workings, well, that absurdity turned into a terrifying reality. He completely flipped his stance. He realized that because these food products are just so ubiquitous and so aggressively marketed, they might actually be far more problematic and dangerous than tobacco or alcohol. And the data proves that this is a full-blown global emergency. Take Mexico, for example. Since 1980, the obesity rate there has risen over five-fold. A five-fold increase in just a few decades is staggering. But this explosion didn't just happen out of nowhere. It was driven largely by international free trade agreements back in the 1990s. Almost overnight, local traditional Mexican diets were aggressively replaced by just aisles and aisles of cheap, brightly colored, ultra-processed imports. It was essentially a rapid dietary colonization that radically shifted an entire nation's health profile in the blink of an eye. Section 1. Engineering the crave. To really understand this, we have to take a look inside the industry laboratories. You see, the food industry relies on a highly precise, biologically engineered hack known as the unholy trinity. Step 1 is salt. They call this the flavor burst because it's the very first thing that hits your tongue and basically demands your brain's attention. Step 2 is fat, which provides that deeply satisfying, comforting mouthfeel. And finally, step 3 is sugar, carefully measured to hit what the industry literally calls the bliss point. Think about a slice of standard, heavily processed frozen pizza for a second. It perfectly balances the salty cheese, the fatty crust, and the hidden sugar in the tomato sauce to hit that mathematical bliss point and maximize its allure. But here is the kicker. Despite using this exact science, you will never, ever hear food engineers use the word addictive in their labs. They absolutely despise that word. If they admit their products are addictive, it opens them up to the same massive legal liabilities and government regulations that eventually took down big tobacco. So instead, they use these deeply cynical, focus-grouped jargon terms. Behind closed doors, they talk about engineering craveability or moorishness. The overarching goal is literally to hack our biology so we just want more and more of the product, endlessly, without ever actually triggering our body's natural feeling of being full. And the neurological data fully backs up this engineered design. Researchers at Lasagna University Hospital observed that rats will frantically press a pedal for sugar, and in rigorous experiments, get this, they actually prefer it over cocaine. How is that even possible? Well, because sugar lights up the exact same dopamine receptors and reward centers in the brain as hard drugs. Brain scans of someone who can't control their intake of sugary, fatty foods show changes that are essentially identical to those caused by excessive alcohol, tobacco, or hardcore drug addiction. That is exactly why those rats will hit the pedal until they literally collapse. This biological manipulation feeds directly into a highly optimized business model relying on the 80-20 rule. The industry knows full well that just 20% of their customers will consume 80% of a given product. They coldly and bluntly refer to these highly vulnerable people suffering from binge eating like Carol, who we talked about earlier, as heavy users. This is the exact same strategy used by mobile gaming companies that rely on whales, or the alcohol industry relying on daily drinkers.
By heavily targeting this captive 20%, multinational food corporations practically guarantee massive, continuous global sales.
Section 2. The industry's open secret. Now, when we look at the corporate playbook, the timeline of what they knew and exactly when they knew it is absolutely revealing. Let's rewind to 1999. A secret meeting took place in Minneapolis, bringing together the CEOs of the biggest U.S. food companies. At that meeting, they were explicitly warned about their undeniable role in the growing obesity epidemic. This was a pivotal moment. They had a real choice to change course, but they actively refused to mess with their most profitable ingredients. Fast forward over 2 decades to 2021, and a leaked internal presentation from Nestlé acknowledged that over 60% of their mainstream products do not meet a recognized definition of health. They've literally known the truth for decades, and they just chose profits anyway. Yet, despite these stunning internal admissions, their public messaging remains incredibly defensive. It is a textbook classic example of corporate gaslighting. When pressed in interviews, public statements from executives at the world's largest food manufacturers continually deflect the blame. They insist they merely provide options for a balanced diet, and they outright deny that their consumers are addicted. So think about that. Behind closed doors, they openly admit 60% of their products are fundamentally unhealthy, but on camera, they put the responsibility squarely back on the buyer, blaming you, the consumer, for simply lacking moderation. Section 3. The policy battleground. This brings us to a really stark contrast in how different governments are actually responding to this massive public health crisis. Let's look back at Mexico. The country found itself facing an unprecedented crisis where the average Mexican drinks 163 liters of soda a year. To put that into perspective, that is almost half a liter of liquid sugar every single day for every man, woman, and child. In response, the government took aggressive, proactive action. They enacted strict laws, including a sugar tax and mandatory, highly visible black warning labels for products with excess sugar, fat, or salt. Crucially, they also forced the removal of friendly animal mascots from children's cereal packaging, which is a massive move to break brand loyalty early on. But Freedom of Information requests revealed something pretty incredible about the pushback. Multinational giants like Nestlé aggressively lobbied the Swiss government to step in and formally oppose Mexico's policies on an international level. Behind the scenes, they called these bold black warning labels radical and claimed they create unnecessary fear. Let's just pause on that for a second. Is it really unnecessary fear, or is it just the ugly truth they desperately don't want you to see? By claiming these labels frighten consumers, they are actively fighting against basic, common-sense transparency. And if you're wondering if regulation actually works, this brilliant comparison illustrates exactly why it matters. A bottle of Fanta in Britain, a country which has implemented a sugar tax, contains just 4.6 grams of sugar per deciliter. But that exact same brand of drink, sold in completely unregulated Switzerland, contains 10.3 grams per deciliter. To translate that visually, that means the Swiss bottle literally has doubled the amount of sugar cubes crammed into the exact same sized bottle, simply because the law allows them to get away with it. Meanwhile, in Switzerland, there are absolutely zero legal constraints in place to limit sugar. Influential lobby groups tied to sugar production heavily influence policy, and this total lack of action has a devastatingly steep price tag. The country spends over 8 billion Swiss francs every single year just dealing with healthcare costs related to obesity and being overweight. But you know what? That financial burden isn't being paid by the food companies who caused it. It's being paid by everyday taxpayers and the public healthcare system. It's a classic case of privatizing the profits and socializing the costs. Section 4. Protecting the next generation. Finally, let's look at who is paying the ultimate price for this lack of action and deliberate corporate engineering. Science tells us that our core eating habits are solidly formed before the age of 10. The food industry understands this brief biological window perfectly. To all the parents listening out there, this isn't an accident. This is exactly why they heavily target children with brightly colored packaging, fun mascots, and those perfectly engineered flavor profiles we discussed earlier. They want to mint lifelong heavy users before these kids even know how to read a nutrition label, pulling them into a system of ultra-processed snacks from day one. And the results of this early manipulation, honestly, they're catastrophic. Pediatricians on the medical front lines, like Dr. Natalie Farquhar-Lambert, are horrified by what they're seeing in their clinics. They report treating young children who are massively overweight by 20, 30 kilos, or even more. As she emphasizes, this isn't just a matter of poor parental choices or a lack of exercise. These children are actively and deliberately being manipulated.
They are the true, innocent victims of this highly engineered, incredibly lucrative food system. Which leaves us with this really haunting question. If we know the science behind the unholy trinity, if we clearly see the deliberate corporate strategies relying on heavy users, and if we witness the devastating human cost every single day in our hospitals, are we really willing to sacrifice 1 or even 2 generations just to protect industry profits? Take a moment to really think about that. Let that hang in the air for a second. The next time you open your pantry, take a look at what's sitting on those shelves with fresh eyes and think about the billions of dollars spent engineering it to get there. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what you consume. I'll see you next time.